I'm sure you've heard me talk about, I'm a veteran. I represent a whole bunch of veterans, and we've had problems with people, veterans wanting to get a medical marijuana card when they know it's going to make your possession of guns illegal. But what we have today, and I'm happy to hear this or see this, is we have an elected district attorney in Pennsylvania who has joined with a nonprofit educational group called the Second Amendment Foundation. And they have sued the federal government, Merrick Garland, the head of ATF, the head of the FBI, and they've pointed out that we have a right to have guns. Okay? This district attorney has a medical marijuana card out of Pennsylvania, and he understands that with that card, he cannot possess or transfer guns, can't even buy ammunition if he is an illegal user or addicted to marijuana. Okay, first of all, addicted to marijuana just makes my stomach turn, but the federal law says, anybody who's been involved with this knows the federal law has evolved to a point where you can't use marijuana and buy a gun if you're honest. They put out a form, they develop regulations and put out a form that specifically asks you to use marijuana. Are you illegally used or addicted to any controlled substance, including marijuana? They're very specific about this. And if you're honest, you're never going to get a gun. And if you lie, now you're committing perjury and you can be in some serious trouble. So this district attorney joined with this group and said, all right, I have a card. I want to possess and I want to buy guns. I can't do that. So he has asked the federal court to declare this federal law illegal, which specifically says that if you use marijuana, you can't buy a gun. He wants that specifically stricken down, not only as written, but as applied to him and anybody else who's a medical marijuana patient now or wants to be one. All the regulations, customs, practices, everything else, the paperwork, they're asking the court to throw all this shit in the trash can because it violates our Second Amendment rights. Okay. Now, back when I was doing a lot of recommendations with Molly, I actually had DAs, teachers, corrections officers, psychologists, physicians, a lot of people with licenses that wanted to keep on the down low, but they wanted to be able to defend themselves. So we gave them recommendations. And when the card came out in California, a whole lot of people went, yeah, I don't want my name on paper with a government agency about using pot because it affects a lot of things, my licensure for, medicine, psychology, teaching, things like that. So it just never took off here in California. And there is this huge question out there about Second Amendment rights and using pot. Using weed, cannabis, whatever term you want to use here. Now, what I found interesting as I read the complaint last night is they were citing Dale Geringer, Mitch Earlywine, and some people that I have worked with and participated in, coming up with the history of cannabis. And if you want to get a little snippet into George Washington and Jefferson, apparently using hot hemp, how O'Shaughnessy brought Indian hemp back to the Western medicine because it was a great seizure control medicine, and that historically no one's ever been deprived their gun rights because they used a medical substance. And that's where the state of Second Amendment law seems to be. Back in 2008, in a case called Heller, the Supreme Court said, look, historically, we're going to look back at the language of the Second Amendment and historically how it's been treated. And that's been further refined up as late as 2022, where they're going to read the Second Amendment and look back in history. How was it handled historically to see if we're going to allow any restrictions on your gun rights? Okay. And there's no evidence that I can find historically where somebody who used substances, medical substances, was deprived of their Second Amendment rights. Okay. And that's basically where they're hanging their hat. Then we look at the language. You can't write a law that takes away my Second Amendment rights. We have a law that takes away your Second Amendment rights. Is this going to be legal? And historically, nobody ever said you can't get a gun because you smoke pot, you take heroin, you drink. None of that stuff's ever happened. Okay. So what I'm hoping for is that we get this case to move up the chain of command quickly. I could put some pressure on the federal government to do something about this. But it also points out the problems behind the scenes here of us trying to advance federal policy, because most of the real draconian cannabis language came about since California and Colorado legalized marijuana. Behind the scenes, they have been writing these into regulations and statutes coming out of Congress that are definitely not friendly to marijuana or cannabis. So there's a lot of back pressure here, and I'm hopeful the courts will look at this and throw it in the trash. Say, no, you can't do this, and let's start over again. That's some more pressure to take a look at the status of cannabis. I think it should be out of the Controlled Substances Act completely and be treated more like alcohol, but that's my position, and I'm hoping that the courts overturn their apple cart here and make them start over again. That's my story for the day. Back at you all. What do you think about this?
Man, shout out to this lawyer, Dale. This guy's a freedom-fighting champion right here.
Yeah.
He's still the DA. He's going to be the DA there till 2025.
Man,
He's got some stones on him, that's for sure.
This guy is a champion, and he's in Pennsylvania.
I love this.
What's that, Jason?
And he's out of Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Man, this is fantastic.
Well, I've been waiting for this because I've known, cops are not so agreeable to smoking weed back when I was representing them. But DAs, I run into a bunch of them that like to smoke weed. They weren't afraid of that.
Yeah.
And this guy's just he's a pot smoking DA.
Yep.
Okay. And it's medical.
This is obviously very exciting for us. And I love this argument. I think it has legs. And every time that the topic of gun access or ownership comes into question as it pertains to cannabis use or, whether you own a business or any ties to cannabis, you're not allowed to have guns, which is absolutely crazy. I just can't help but think my brain automatically taps into the alcohol culture that's within our law enforcement and military. These people are handed guns like over and over and over, the most high-powered guns that are made. And there is a huge alcohol culture in there. And how many individuals turn to alcohol when they're feeling suicidal and end up killing themselves with firearms? I mean, there's just so much inequity here. And then also, I am in no way, shape, or form tied to this company, but I think there is a slight short-term alternative for cannabis users. Have you guys seen this Byrna thing? It's like a gun that shoots rubber bullets.
Yes.
And it's, quote, less lethal, and you don't have to have a license of any sort.
And you can just carry it around.
Interesting. Worthy of taking a look at.
Pop people with it. Pow, pow, pow.
I mean, it still can be lethal. You hit somebody in the right place.
It's less lethal.
You know
Dry out, kid.
Yeah, just shoot somebody in the nuts.
Listen, I hate to
get killed from rubber bullets. I'm just saying, and riots ain't new.
I thought people only got killed from rubber bullets on prison yards.
You saw during the pandemic. I don't know if we can say this and get demonetized, but during the pandemic, you saw cats in Minnesota were getting ran up on by the SWAT team with rubber bullets and everything, and a couple of people didn't wake up from that. So just saying,
just saying, rubber bullets.
I hate to sound like a broken record every time we have this issue come up, but to me, it's so ludicrous that we are talking about taking somebody's amendment, the Bill of Rights, the thing that we established as a country. Like, we were ready to die for this thing, right? And we are ready to take somebody's Second Amendment right and take it away because of a medication that works for them. Let's simplify it down to that. You are telling somebody that they do not have the right to bear arms because they use a medication that makes them suffer less.
I agree with you, Luke.
So
it's such hypocrisy.
Let me take that a step further now. Okay, so we have HHS and we have the numerous people in the federal government right now that are moving down to a Schedule 3. It's an obvious move. I anticipate it being within the next 90 days, possibly. And so we have now basically a tentative medical acceptance of the medical efficacy of cannabis. So you are now saying the federal government has recognized the medical efficacy of cannabis, but I still cannot possess a firearm and protect my family, even though it's a recognized medicine by you.
Yep.
Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And again, as a people, please, we have to be very, very careful when we make laws that restrict our rights. Be very careful, because it's incremental when these steps happen. And before you know it, you wake up and you won't have any rights left. So please, it's a very slippery slope. Do not touch these amendments unless it is absolutely necessary.
And I don't think it's ever really necessary to touch these amendments. But on that, we got to go to a commercial, and we're going to be right back.